geographic equation. But in its day, it was said to be a mighty, mighty river. And the Saraswati indicates some turbulence. And of course, we know from archaeological discoveries that along the Saraswati Indus-Gangetic plain were vast, vast populations, great civilizations. We call them the Indus Valley civilizations, Harappa culture, and so on. Very ancient, with small indications that there were Vedic and yogic concepts there way back. And if you have a demise of a population or civilization, let us say some to what is it now? Let's say some 3,000 years ago, then really to build that up would take a few more thousand years. Let's say 5,000 years ago. Some say even 10,000. By satellite, you can see the evidence of where the Saraswati River was. And prior to that, some scholars, particularly Western scholars, had said that the Vedas were just announcing a myth. And some identified it with some other rivers. But now I think there's a great consensus that the Saraswati River was a mighty river that carved out a valley, the evidence of which we can see by satellite. Something which flows is a concept. Let's relate it to God's grace. God's grace is a flowing thing. How do we know that there is evidence of a God? It's because we see flowing. Things are being poured this way and that way. Let's take thought, for example. The thought really is a flow arriving at our substation, as it were, ready for us to divert. Please go here, please go there. In meditation, it's completely pointless asking for God's grace. It's already flowing as thought. All we have to do is direct it here and there, like a fireman putting out a fire. All his job is holding the hose pipe and direct it here and directing there. Of course, the fireman claims, this is me, I put the fire out. But that's his mistake. The philosopher will ask him, please consider carefully, did you put the fire out or the water itself did it? And if he has that kind of bent of mind, he will understand literally it was the water that did it. My role is just to hold the hose pipe here and there and direct whatever was flowing already. So for anything in art, culture, speech, or anything like that to flow, don't forget, Vivekananda, surrendering to Mother Saraswati, was letting go of all his personal difficulties, all his personal egocentric cognizance. And he was in this letting go movement. This great flow of wisdom came through. And that was a kind of model for all his talks and speeches and writings. The capacity to stand back and be attuned to the divine grace and allow it to flow. And all his role would be, please, this way, please, that way. And for this reason, we have the most amazing lectures and writings. The same is true of musicians. If you ask Beethoven, how did you construct a symphony? He might well answer, the secret of what is called genius is that I was able to walk in a nature scene and completely be attuned to a certain flow that came. And then a structure was built because I wrote that down in musical notes with certain rhythms and patterns. And there we have a Beethoven symphony, revolutionary in its day, completely coming out of the blue, not following standard patterns and themes, but something that somehow conveyed his feeling and something also that conveyed some lesson for humanity. In the same way, we find the rhythmic phrases like Beethoven coming out from Swami Vivekananda's mouth. Now, this seems to be a long-winded answer to your question, but my point is this. I sit down, I insert any thought of my own, there's a struggle. It's a question of waiting, and the phrase is, it came to me. And all of us have to do it. If we want to be creative, if we want to be good meditators, if we want to be, Jesus put in this language, thy will be done. If we want to put our will aside and allow a divine will to flow through, then we have to be prepared to let go. No map, no compass, no preconceived agenda, a completely open mind, a recipient mind, and say, Lord, I'm waiting here and listening and seeing if your grace can flow. The grace can flow, sometimes flows very well, and sometimes some ideas of it flow, and so further waiting is necessary. So I can't say that this is my thought at all. We can say it's a divine flow, no doubt, using some skills in language construction and things like that. But otherwise, it's a flow of ideas that come. And because there's only one mind, cosmic mind, it may be relevant to somebody who picks this thought up. It may impact their life in some way or another, so be it. But that's not my aim at all. So my aim is to be open, allow this flow to come through. Now, this morning's thought, I can be more specific about. It actually came from a dream. I was woken and I had a dream about not just any mountain, but it was snow-capped Himalayan mountains. And there was a kind of shaking me awake. And I registered that this entity was my guru. And the distinct words clarion call came, and it came in the form of a journal, and the instruction was very clear. The reason I got a kind of what I interpreted as a divine message that I should start a journal somewhere. And it should be maybe a weekly publication. And the whole thing appeared to me very clearly. So immediately that happened, I took it as the flow of divine grace, which was there. And that's how these thoughts are formulated. But my point is, we should all have this let go attitude. We cannot access grace. Of course, grace is already there, but Sri Krishna's language, the wind of God's grace is ever blowing. It's not that we have to look for it. It be ever blowing, it being always present, we have to set our sail. It's not easy to set a sail, by the way. Anybody experienced in sailing will know that a certain effort is required. We have to put the mast up. We have to find out where the pulleys go. We have to not get the ropes entangled. And we have to hoist the sail in such a way. And even when we start hoisting it, even a small amount of open sail, you'll see the wind wants to push it along. No amount of huffing and puffing or blowing will make this sail go. It's the powerful wind that does it. What a very apt example Sri Ramakrishna gives us. And very simple. So the wind is blowing. The wind of God's grace is always blowing. If it wasn't like that, food would not be digested, thought would not be available to us, speech would not be available to us, the heart would not pump, the cells would not repair, and the one that remains alert while we sleep would not solve our problems and repair our cells and give us pocket money the next day, having woken us up for useless thinking. All of this then is God's grace, and we have to align it with love. What other thing is there? How do we know that God is love? It's because there's something being poured. We can call this God's grace, continuously poured without asking for any return. Not the kind of religious God, or the God we find in several religions that says, let's have a bargaining process. Let's sit down on the marketplace. I'll do this if you give me this. If I'm in trouble, I say, oh Lord, Let me now do whatever it is. Being in Ireland, let's put a Roman Catholic flavor to it. I'll do 500 rosaries. That is a series of mantras, whether I know it, whether I not, whether I mean it, whether I don't. Just simply repeat it hastily in order to get some kind of result or reward. If we're looking for a result and reward, this is not what we mean by love. And Swami Vivekananda gives us a wonderful triangular definition of what is love. Unconditional love has these three dimensions. There's no fear whatsoever. No result is needed or is required or is asked for. He puts it in the language of reward. No reward. No reward for our effort, and therefore I'll get this. I put in this, therefore I'll get that. No reward. And no rival. Now this is so profound, we can apply this love formula in every context. Imagine now domestic human relationships with this formula of love. No one has any fear. No one has any reward from it. I love you. If you don't love me, I still continue to love you. And absolutely no rival means no unfaithfulness anywhere in a marriage, let's say. So it's a wonderful, wonderful, precise definition. And how did Swami Vivekananda arrive at this? By suspending his personal mental activity and allowing this grace to come through, what we call inspiration. This inspiration comes. If you try to struggle or put your own effort in, it won't work. The highest creativity will come from the source of the creativity itself. So that is the answer, and the lesson for us all is, particularly in moments of meditation, another way of saying this is faith. We have to have complete faith. We have to have faith in our intrinsic fundamental self. That is equivalent to faith in God. But when we put it in ourselves, in the context of ourself, we realize that there's a radiating effect of grace in individual talents and abilities, with every person having seemingly an individual design. That is, with an individual set of skills and talents that no one else ever has had, has now, or ever will have. Something like, I put it always in this way, something like an angel waiting in a lift before you're born, and then you're born to carry out some angelic work somewhere. To be a messenger, original meaning of angel is messenger. To be a messenger somewhere. That means that all your activities and thoughts will have no egocentric dimension in them, because you're here in order to complete what we call dharma through swadharma. That is your individual skills and talents and abilities that are compatible with keeping everything in order. Everything, the environment, the domestic environment, the social environment, the national environment, and humanity's environment. When there's a nice balance with all of this, then this is called dharma. It's from a root that really infers there's a harmony. A harmony is necessary. And on the individual basis, so-called, a harmony between the body, the mind, the emotions, the intellect, and the spirit. This is the harmony that we're looking for. What creates the discord? Well, the discord is 100% caused by egocentricity, thinking and claiming that we are alone are responsible. And this, of course, in turn is from an ignorant position, not understanding the full principles that are available to us through the Vedanta philosophy. The principles of the Vedanta philosophy, they're very simple. There are only three principles are there. There's only one existence. Nothing else exists besides that. Secondly, that existence in me at the fundamental level is one and the same with that. And thirdly, this is mithya. This is all an apparition. You can wave our hands saying this, looking around, all this. The Vedas, the Upanishads describe this and that. That is that fundamental unchanging entity. This is all the other things that change. And this comes as waves, and waves come and waves go. Modern science has discovered these waves, or at least the inference of these waves, and become puzzled because sometimes they look like waves and sometimes they look like particles, and we can't reconcile anything, and it remains a question mark. But as time goes on, there's more of an interest in trying to discover what is behind this whole universe. Now, I just, in the spirit of this letting go, I randomly opened a lecture, but it comes under the subject of Bhakti Yoga. And we have to remember that the Vedanta philosophy, in its practical form, encourages us from the days of the Bhagavad Gita, that this devotional way is the most suitable and easiest for the most people. It's not to say that the other ways are not good. And the other thing that is emphasized is we need a harmony of all the methods. All four yogas have to be employed. This is the very meaning of the Ramakrishna Math and Mission Order emblem, which is there. Swami Vivekananda designs it in such a way to incorporate as a total emblem, very cleverly, all of the four systems, even though he declares one or more or all of these can be free. Actually, it is very unusual that you'd be able to pick up one. And so the Bhagavad Gita incorporates this, and it becomes updated in the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and vocalized by Swami Vivekananda in these four teachings, these four yogas, these four approaches. There's one chapter he puts, the mantra Om. What I find is many people repeat this Om, but don't really know its meaning. Patanjali Yoga Sutra is very clear. If you want to concentrate the mind, then you can think, meditate on Ishvara, whose sound symbol is Om, and meditate on its meaning. It's not left as a meaningless repetition. So we have to understand, what does it mean? If you really want a succinct explanation, you can say it represents a sum totality. And the sum totality, from our personal experience, comes in three varieties. These are three states of consciousness. And so for this reason, the Mandukya Upanishad of only 12 verses is centered around this sound symbol Om, with each broken down sound, each part of the overall sound representing a particular state of consciousness, waking, dream, and dreamless sleep. All have the same characteristic of coming and going, like three trains coming and going, station master standing on the platform, neither coming nor going, but observing the coming and going of the others. By now you're familiar with my example of a station master. You refresh your memory. Just as a station master in the old days of trains coming and going, not controlled digitally or anything, but by a human with a whistle. And one train comes. This train has loaded with goods, and the goods are offloaded, and new goods are loaded, and the train goes off. Station master never came with the first train, that goods train, and never went with it, but stood, and when the time to blow the whistle came, blew the whistle, and the train moved on. Next train comes, the passenger train, people get off, people get on, all kinds of colors are there, all kinds of activities, people greeting each other, people embracing each other, new people getting on. But when the whistle blows, that also goes off. And then the last train, empty train, nothing there. First train, of course, is our waking state. And the waking state has components of causality. It's within a framework of time and space and causation, and has an individual identity, let us call it body, and an individual consciousness, let us call it mind. And with this equipment, it juxtaposes itself against every person and place and event in its environment. The difficulty with this identification is it's in a situation where it's obliged to either fight or run away or yield. These three options are open to it. Unless something is shifted, unless we understand that we can get out of this waking state into a different reality. That reality we call dream. And dream, in waking state we had one ego, but in dream we find so many, and all of them a product of the dreamer. So many egos are there. There's no stability for the ego, since many egos are there, many egos come and many egos go. But still the basic formula is there. There are people, places, and events, and still subject to time and space. And still there's a causation going on, a certain sequence. We don't register in the dream that this is a mere dream. Only from a waking point of view will we declare it. But the components in the dream that enabled us to declare it a mere dream, just a misty nothing, was evaluated from the waking state where these criteria still apply. That there is constant change, that there is everything is relative, related to our viewpoint, related to the sense organs. That's the only way we know there's a world out there, is that the five objects are there related to five senses. If we had six senses, six objects would be there. If we had a different ability, if we had the capacity for X-ray vision, we'd complement each other on our wonderful bone structure. So we are completely limited, and this limitation is how we relate within our small circle, and it is how we genetically survive. If we didn't have that, genetic survival would not be possible. And then eventually, when the passenger train representing a dream moves off, a blank train comes on, no goods, no passengers, empty carriages, nothing there, a blank stage. This is called dreamless sleep. Nothing's happening there. But the one constant thing is there's a witness, station master sitting on the platform, anticipating, come on train, let's come. Let's stand here on the platform for a while. And then after some time you can go off. And we'll repeat this delivery. We'll repeat this pattern of trains coming and going. There only be one constant thing, the trains themselves, and this is the weakness of any analogy, there'll always be some thing which is not entirely appropriate. So the inappropriate, the thing that doesn't fit is that this analogy doesn't mention there only being one constant one. These trains must be manufactured by it. And so for that reason, the station master represents pure consciousness. That given the restrictions, time and space and limitations and ignorance can come out in this way. And the first thing, of course, in our delusion will be ignorance, a kind of cloudy darkness that obscures the truth of our own pure nature. We can compare this to a dreamless sleep, a cloud of ignorance whose characteristic is tamas. We can compare it to a potential area cosmologically where that supreme sits, God alone stands, nothing being there. So what we call a dreamless sleep is actually God sitting, not doing anything. Instead of saying, therefore, I went into a deep sleep, you can say, I sat on God's lap. And we sat there together. Instead of saying a dream, we can say, we developed a number of different themes and adventures and decided that there was an indecisive world, actually. That's what we decided. Something vague. And we can now develop it as a more crystallized and coarser theme called a waking state. How would we reverse it? We have to reverse it by doing the opposite. We withdraw into a world of imagination. Meditation is our fourth state. Of course, 4 states are there. Waking, dream, dreamless sleep. The fourth, according to the Mandukya Upanishad, would be Turiya, which simply means the fourth. That state is just that station master standing alone, nothing to see, even the platform is gone. No platform, no trains, no whistle, nothing. Only that entity standing, beaming. So, but another state can be defined, and that state has all the characteristics of individuality, time, space, causation, people, places, events, but this time it's consciously constructed. So what is meditation this way? Is a planned dream. We start off with using our imagination. And in this imagination, we are tuned into God's grace flowing as a potentiality and using the inherent skills and effects of grace called skills and talents, the capacity to steer our thought this way or that, in a consciously constructed drama. Something that is elevating to the mind and leads us inward until we reach a state, one thought that's called meditation proper. When that one thought itself is gone, it's called samadhi. People make an error of trying to do that immediately, ignoring the fact that it's impossible as long as they stand aside separately as an individual, thinking this is all my effort. In meditation, as soon as there's an inkling of an effort, it's no longer meditation. So meditation requires this let go attitude that we discussed, saying, let me now sit, let me arrange a listening post, let me be attentive. Now that we are sitting together, I'm now ready. That means an opening has taken place. A gate has opened. A floodgate has opened through which God's grace pours. And when that pauses, when that goes through, when that pours through, as it's pouring through everywhere, please don't be inclined to say, it's my effort. The truth is, it's all God's effort. It's all God's divine grace flowing. I have nothing to do with it. It's all nature. Nature is the doer, not I. And of course, in Vedanta, we don't say there's any difference. So we accept all 3 philosophical positions available to us and say, I'm your devotee. You are my master, or you are my parent, father, mother, or friend, or lover, whatever position we like to put, whatever is psychologically conducive for me. And that leads me like a key inserted in a door. We can say the keyhole that we inserted in is our personal chosen ideal, Ishtadevata. And with this we unlock something that opens a broader view. And with this broader view, we can agree with Ramanuja that this whole world is simply connected. It is the product of a cosmic mind. There's a universality there. We are a part of the divine. We're a spark of the fire of the divine. And once we understand this, we can see God everywhere. So having a process where we see God in nature, we call it a dualistic approach. And then we can see, oh, Lord, you're operating through nature. Then as nature, this is ultimately, you see, Ramanuja on the edge of non-dualism. And then finally, there are no two. In, through, as, and beyond. That's a process. And when we construct meditation, we construct it in such a way that it is a wonderful, beautiful journey that takes us to a position of internal rapture and poise, where even the breath is suspended. And then at that point, this is called meditation proper. So this is the process, but it begins with listening and opening. And that requires faith. Faith in, as I say, God in you, but faith also in God in, through, as, and beyond nature itself. So that in a sense we become what we call panentheists, not pantheists. We don't think that nature is a material thing with only a self-producing, self-renovating, self-fulfilling entity by itself as a mechanical thing, because there are some theories like that. There's one popular theory that is we have come across by computer scientists that say this is a kind of computer simulation. What we call a universe is nothing more than a computer simulation. It doesn't answer any of the questions, apart from the non-scientific aspect to it, which says that all the information bits required to construct a universe would be beyond any computer's capacity. The very idea that you reduce what is evidently conscious to a mechanical thing like this would just be trying to fit something awkward, trying to fit an unnatural solution into a profound experience and question. So something beyond that, we call this panentheism then, so that there's an entity beyond that. And when we stand in that entity fully, there is no nature to talk about. It's all gone. It all disappears. So Vivekananda starts out like this, the mantra, Om, and we have just said what this Om means in terms of consciousness. He says, but we are now considering not these Mahapurushas, the great incarnations. To understand that, we have to see that his previous talk was on incarnations. And so incarnations come like a tidal wave of spirituality breaking upon the world, and people feel spirituality in the very air. Recently, we had a very wonderful celebration of the great Swami Purnananda, a very saintly person in anybody's scale of values. And he relates a dialogue between an atheist and Krishna. You can see how modern these dialogues are. Oh, I don't believe in God. How can there be a God? It's all just matter. Everything else is superstition, really. And Ramakrishna doesn't argue for a God. Ramakrishna clearly a theist and more. And he said, who said there was a God? I never said there was a God. A wonderful reply. Yeah, did I say there was such a thing? But some source is there, and it doesn't matter what you call it. So what he's saying is, don't bypass the problem. Some source is there. Why don't you look toward that? And supposing you discover that it's energy. Many people have come to that conclusion. It's all energy. All right? You can call it energy if you like. We just happen to call it God. So these great incarnations are there, a special wave that comes. But only the Siddha Gurus, the teachers who have attained the goal, they, as a rule, have to convey the germs of spiritual wisdom to the disciple by means of mantras, or words to be meditated upon. What are these mantras? These incarnations can come by a look, by a touch. A person can be freed. This we know. Because it's the very cosmic mind that has come. It's the same echo as the prologue of the Christian John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt amongst us. Of course, if you introduce a theology that says it came as a particular historical person, then you create a number of difficulties and problems, not to mention a kind of exclusivist doctrine. But supposing you say, from this logos, from this nous, from this cosmic mind, somehow a wave erupts. The whole universe, the whole cosmos is a series of waves, but a giant wave comes along. And this giant wave comes along from cosmic mind, which is consciousness in its creative capacity, and comes in order to rescue or restore some balance. Then what happens? This world becomes flesh not only as the universe, but there's an exaggerated wave that comes to make sure that this universe, from human point of view, runs according to a certain level of harmony, not just now, but for the next 1,000, 2,000 years. But what about these ordinary teachers? What about those who are small waves? What about their succession? What about the apostolic succession that came from it? Do they have the same capacity? They have to rely on conveying this through mantras, is his point. He says the whole of this universe has, now according to Indian philosophy, Swami Vivekananda is very careful in his language. Supposing he gets a challenge, you said this, you said that. His reply is, didn't you hear correctly? In his Patanjali Yoga Sutras, every second moment he's saying, according to the yogis, this. Somebody objects, don't ask me, don't bring a complaint here. According to the yogis, they themselves say this. So according to Indian philosophy, both name and form as its condition of manifestation. The whole of this universe is name and form, in other words, manifested name and form. What do we mean by name and form? Form we can understand. Form we can catch with the various senses. Form we can make out through touch. Form we can make out through color, sight, shape. Form we can make out through the form, the musical form, those set of vibrations that come to us and we can identify easily. But what about name? Name, that is, it comes, language and the picture that comes with it are one and the same. In meditation, for example, we start off by a series of words. We conduct some internal dialogue and we wait for the corresponding pictures to come. And we complete the process by aligning our emotion with it, put feeling into it. That's essentially the meditative process. So form is the gross aspect, but name is the very subtle aspect of it. Name is the internal ideation of it, the picture that comes with it. If it be true, he says, that nature is built throughout on the same plan, this kind of conditioning by name and form must also be the plan of the building of the whole of the cosmos. Is a kind of axiom, essential. What happens on a small scale here happens everywhere. If I want to discover the whole universe, I don't have to mark out every jot and tittle. I don't have to examine every star. I don't have to investigate every planet. I don't have to count up every atom, although now we can in the observable universe. I don't have to investigate every tiny, tiny part or suggestion of a part or assess every particle. I can simply take the nearest thing to me, which is me. I can take this body-mind complex. I can take this thing that in summary I call I and do an investigation. What am I? What am I? Maharshi relentlessly pursued this question, as did other sages. What am I? Who am I? Who am I? Until they got a final datum, a satisfactory position beyond which you cannot go. And so we make an assumption. What is here in the microcosm is there in the macrocosm. What is the law? Here's the law everywhere. And it is not only this philosophy that does it. Modern science does it. There are exceptions, but most modern sciences today assume that there are immutable laws that have existed and pre-existed our cosmological models. Mysteriously, they're there. Historically, they were there from Descartes onwards. Descartes and Plato had these various forms, pre-existing forms were there. And irrationally, people assume that these laws are there, immutable, constant, never changing. They just happen to be there. We have no choice about it. Now, of course, Descartes believed in God. Isaac Newton believed in God. And they happily attributed these laws to a lawmaker that we call God. But of course, as materialism has taken its grip and also its toll on modern science, much of modern science had done away with the lawmaker as irrelevant, but retained the laws. It's tantamount to retaining the Abrahamic religious values. So we take the same approach that if one law applies here, is duplicated everywhere. Let's take it to a different level. Supposing we assume that the source of everything can be described as Sat Chit Ananda, existence itself, consciousness itself, bliss itself. Or the Taittiriya Upanishad will say Ananta, that is infinity. Can we not see an evidence of that? Should we not expect evidence of that? Will it not come through? Will existence not come through in our wish to survive? Can we not find an explanation that everything, even from at the atomic level, everything wants to remain intact? Everything wants to survive. You see today with the COVID virus, there's a desperation to save lives. As if death were a great, great difficulty. This wish to survive, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Patanjali himself relegates to the area of klesha, obstacle. It's an obstacle, the final frontier of obstacles, clinging to life. Clinging to life is derived from our attachment to it. Our attachment to it is from our wish to survive by moving toward the pleasurable and away from the painful. And that in itself is derived from ego, a sense of ownership, a prophet-actor complex. And that itself is derived from ignorance. The ignorance being that there is a more than one existence. Knowledge being that what we see in this waking world, dream world, is but seeming fragmentation of one entity. What we call the world is nothing more than fragmented God, from the highest conclusion in the Vedanta philosophy. So let us make an axiom and assume that what happens in the microcosm and knowledge of it happens in the macrocosm. So he goes on with this assumption. If it be true, he's postulating it, that nature is built throughout on the same plan, this kind of conditioning by name and form must also be the plan of the building of the whole of the cosmos. As one lump of clay being known, all things of clay are known, so the knowledge of the microcosm must lead to the knowledge of the macrocosm. If we think that the ultimate is existence itself, then there's every reason why we wish to survive. If we think that this is consciousness, then there is every reason why things behave in a designed way and come out as intelligence for us and self-awareness. And if this is ananda, bliss, there's every reason why it should come out as a wish for joy, happiness, and the emotional tenderness of love. So it is not unreasonable to say that based on this evidence, this original declaration of Sat Chit Ananda is correct. Now the form is the outer crust, he says, and the name or the idea is the inner essence of kernel. The body is the form, and the mind, or antakarana, technical term, means internal instrument, is the name, and sound symbols are universally associated with the names in all beings having the power of speech. In the individual man, the thought waves rising in the limited mahat, that great thing, we can register it as intellect, known as the chitta or mind stuff, must manifest themselves first as words and then as the more concrete forms. And coming back to the original question answered, where these thoughts come from, simple answer I could have said was, they come from God, as all things do. But of course, we have to elaborate just so that you get some value from it. But if you see how it develops firstly as an idea or a name, an idea translated into a concept, a picture translated into a concept, the concept translated into words, the words translated into speech. That's the process. Similarly, if we want to reverse the process, we start off with speech. We then go to word. We then go to concept or picture. And we then go to its original aspect. In the individual man, the thought waves rising in the limited mahat, known as the chitta or mind stuff, must be manifest themselves in this way. In the universe, so what happens on the small level, microcosm, happens on the macrocosm. So what happens in the macrocosmic area, there is this thing called Brahma. Brahma, otherwise called Hiranyagarbha, the golden seed, or the golden womb of all beings, or the cosmic Mahat, the cosmic great one. What we call God, basically. What religion calls God is this cosmic mind. First manifested himself as name, and then as form. That is to say, as this universe. All this expressed sensible universe is the form, and behind it stands the eternal inexpressible sphota, the manifester, as logos, or word. This eternal sphota, this essential and eternal material of all ideas or names, is the power through which the Lord creates the universe. Nay, the Lord first becomes conditioned as this sphota, and then evolves himself as the yet more concrete, sensible universe. This sphota has one word as its only possible symbol. And this is Om. And as we can, by no possible means of analysis, separate the word from the idea, Om and the eternal sphota are inseparable. And therefore, it is out of this holiest of all holy words, the mother of all names and forms, the eternal Om, that the whole universe may be supposed to have been created. Now he goes on then to describe the linguistic aspect or the sound aspect of this, maintaining really that the only possible universal sound symbol for this ultimate totality is this Om. So you can imagine, you see what thought is thought is a flow of things. It's a flow, and it's to catch that flow. This is what Sri Krishna meant, see, to catch this flow. So we have but to set our sail. And don't think it's an easy thing to set the sail, but there has to be, at least to start with, an openness, a willingness to be open. In order to be open, we have to deconstruct this familiar I, what we call ego, and make it a channel, an open channel for God's grace to flow through. And other people will get the effect of it. That's the point.